Not doing
The
that.
pizza is a real
chicken
pizza.
flour.
No, it's chicken parmesan.
It's a real
The only
pizza
thing that
made with chicken.
The only thing that's added to
It's
this
a
pizza
pizza,
is pepperoni
but even
on a
worse
chicken
for you.
parmesan.
It's a pizza, but even worse for you because
It's
it has
terrible
meat.
for you. Well, KFC makes it, first of all. So
So what is it really?
it's not even that good of chicken.
Delicious, but
Delicious? You think it would be delicious?
I think KFC fried chicken. I do really like. I love fried chicken.
I mean, I love fried
I
chicken.
don't even eat meat that much
but
anymore.
You
but
just
I
insulted
love fried
every
chicken.
Southerner in the world.
Extra crispy
by
or
saying
original recipe?
KFC is-
Our goal on this podcast is to know Jesus better and by the power of his Spirit do better so together we can be a little better. Well, welcome to A Little Better. So glad to have you here for a very special week. This is the final week number 6 of 6 on our series on prayer, Dear God. And amazing message, Drew. I'm looking forward to talking about it. But for those who want to catch up or get reminded, why don't you tell us your sermon in 60?
Yeah, we ended the prayer series with a prayer that we don't often pray, right? Dangerous prayers. And we looked at David's Psalm 139 and 3 dangerous prayers that he prayed. Basically, search me, test me, and lead me. And we kind of navigated through why those are dangerous prayers. And then we kind of led our church to say, hey, would you be willing to pray one of those prayers this week? Whatever the Spirit kind of reveals to you, if it's search me, God, or test me, God, or lead me, which dangerous prayer would you be willing to pray?
Well, often I ask, and I'll ask it too, like, what do you leave on the table, either for this message or for the entire series? But I think there might be some people out there, hoping you had not added some of the things you had added. I really feel like this series could have ended after week 5. Mm-hmm. You know, you set up the theology of prayer, the why of prayer. Hey, let's give you some tips on how to pray. God bless you and go. But no. You brought week 6. So Michelle is here to talk about it as well. What was week 6's impact on you? Was there stuff you wish Drew subtracted or added?
No, I told Drew, I think this is kind of like the teeth in prayer. This is the nitty gritty, the stuff of prayer that changes us. And I think, they're considered dangerous prayers because we're asking God to take the reins and take control of our life. So I think, in each and every one of those, test me means I'm okay with whatever you do, right? Search me means I'm willing to change and do things that and stop doing or start doing things that I'm not doing now. And just to lead me wherever you want me to go. And I'm going to put my wishes and desires aside, and I'm going to decide that your way is best no matter what. And so I think that that lack of control and trust in God is what makes it feel dangerous. Yeah. It's not actually like God's out to get us, right? Like you gave the example of God testing you by you having like a lung puncture. And I don't always think that God testing us ends up with us like in the hospital.
It's true.
But definitely it can feel dangerous if God tests us by asking us to do something really difficult or putting a situation in our life that is difficult to respond to. And we have to trust him.
Yeah, I think that's the danger, right? You're basically asking God to lead you to where you can't see. And, who wants to walk down a road where you don't know where it leads? Yeah. And that's that's what feels so dangerous about it. And sometimes even danger is maybe not the best word. I don't know the word to all encompass what we're talking about, but I like this idea of danger because it kind of goes against everything that we would go after, right? I even think when we pray prayers of safety, right? God, protect me. God, protect my children. And this is the opposite of that. We're actually saying, God, put me in hard situations. God, put me in places where I have to trust you and you alone. And that's what feels dangerous.
I think that's super helpful for me. I appreciate that. It's that scary part of not knowing, what the outcome will be and being okay with it. I mean, when you were praying about test me, when I was listening to your message, I mean, you got up to the point. I mean, I'm like, Drew, do not pray that prayer. I mean, I just knew something bad was going to happen.
Young and dumb, right?
That's
what they call it. Yeah.
So we got to ask you, for our audience here, how are your lungs today? What was the end of that story?
Yeah, I mean, my lungs function great. I'm missing a portion of one of my lungs, so they had to remove it and basically like sandpaper my whole lung to remove blemishes from it that were basically popping. They still don't know today why. Like doctor who did thousands of these surgeries, he said, I've done this my whole life. I've never seen a case like yours.
You could be a journal article. Very strange.
I could be, right?
Yeah.
So
evidence of a divine intervention there. No one can explain it. So very interesting.
Very true. What's interesting is like in writing this message, I wasn't going to go this direction. I think one of the directions I was going to go is like one of the most dangerous prayers you can pray. And I think this is kind of like all encompassing of what David prays is give me faith. And faith is similar to like faith puts you in dangerous positions, right? Like faith to give to something where you're like, I don't know how you're going to provide, God. Give me faith to like Abram, go to a place I don't know where I'm going. Like that's ultimately one of the most dangerous prayers is God, give me faith to trust you no matter where it goes.
Right.
So Drew, let me ask you, outcome wise, you had your lung punctured again.
Yep.
How did that affect your faith?
Yeah, so I give a little bit of like indication into that in the sermon, but I don't know if there was ever a time in my life where I literally had to depend on God more, because you find yourself in a situation where I couldn't do anything. You know what I mean? Like I was forced to like be on my knees. I was forced to wonder, like, is this the end of my life? Because the first one, it was pretty simple. Like they put a chest tube in, by the way, most painful experience I've ever had in my life. And it blew up and the doctor's like, you're going to be fine. Like this was random. But like a week later, it happened again and no one knew what was going on. And I was just like, okay, what is happening? And they put me in an ambulance and took me to the like most prestigious hospital in Atlanta. And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, you're about to have a major lung surgery. And I'm like, your lungs seem pretty important for life.
Yeah.
And the doctors were so a little bit like, just not knowing that, like, they didn't give me any indication like, hey, we don't know if you're going to wake up from the surgery. We don't know. We think this is going to help you. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, all right, here we go, God.
So Ashley was with you at the time?
Yeah, no kids, just me and Ashley.
But you're far away from you're in Atlanta, far away from other family.
Yeah, none of my family was there. Like after the surgery, my mom flew in and helped me. I was in the hospital for, I think, 7 days. I had an epidural in my back for 4 days. It was like, I'm not lying. Like it was the time of my life where I can look back and be like, wow, God, sorry I prayed that prayer, but like God grew me so much. Like I walked out of that situation. I would have never, if God would have told me what happened, do you accept this challenge? I would have said no. But like he took me through blindly and it changed my walk with him. It literally, like it made me depend on God so much. And obviously throughout my life, there's ups and downs where like I probably need to go through something like that again, where it just reminds you that you aren't in control, even when you want to be.
Yeah, I think another scary one, right? You're talking about just like not knowing where God's going to take you, but also, I mean, you talk to some people who might be hiding something or not dealing with something. I mean, we can all think of times where we had to confess.
Yeah,
I can think of things. It was just so painful, but so good. Ultimately,
yeah,
right. Where I almost feel like it was a tumor removed, right? I mean, this thing is going to kill you spiritually. You let it fester, and no one wants surgery, and no one wants to be vulnerable in that way. But to confess, some hard things.
Yeah, what's interesting is like when you think about dangerous prayers, probably the one that you think is least dangerous is "Search me," like know who I am at the depths of I am. I don't know why. I think maybe because of my position, I really relate to this dangerous prayer because I struggle to really let people know who I am because I'm nervous that, they would see my flaws and it would diminish my ability to influence them as a pastor. Like, oh, pastors don't struggle with this. And so I genuinely struggle with, in human relationships, allowing people to really see all of me because it's terrifying to me. Because I hold a position where I think at some level people expect me to be different than everybody else, even though I'm not. And I don't want to burst that bubble, even though at times I really try to.
I think you've done a great job of being really vulnerable in the past, even from stage, about things that you've struggled with or things that God has taught you along the way. And I think there's obviously some wisdom in who you share things with. And,
definitely.
We don't all walk into community group and share with the entire group all of these things, but community group and our church and the counseling team, there's all these different facets that give us opportunities to share one-on-one and do those kinds of things like confession. So there's obviously some wisdom in holding back and not sharing everything with everybody. But I think that you've been quite vulnerable and translucent with our church family about things you've struggled with. And we are all sinners.
That's right.
Even David, like you were saying in your sermon, I mean, he's the man after God's own heart, and he sinned incredibly. And it was after he sinned, it's like a freedom that he got when he was willing to confess.
Yeah.
He was confronted and he immediately said, I did do that, and he prayed and he got right with God. And he didn't let it sit anymore. As soon as God poked him and said, this is where you need to change, he did. And then he wrote this prayer about search me and know me. That was like a theme and a rhythm in his life after that.
And I think that's what's beautiful is even if you don't feel like you have a safe relationship from a human standpoint to be honest with, the amazing thing about God is he's always a safe place. Right, he's always a safe place for you to go and say, God, I'm wrestling with this. I'm struggling with this. You already know it, but like, God, help me, search me, remove this from me. Like that, I think is so beautiful in our walk with God. Is there we never get judgment. We never get a bad response. God is always there to help us walk away from sin, but love us despite the sin that's there. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing to have in your life, is a safe place where you don't have to worry about how God's going to respond perfectly to your dysfunction.
Right. And that prior vertical relationship in truth, how it's beautiful when it does transform the horizontal relationships. Yeah. I mean, I years ago having to confess something, to Karen, that was very hard, and I would not have blamed her, for judging me, but she forgave me. And then and then you horizontally get to experience a little taste of she knows me and loves me, but that Tim Keller quote that for God there's no secrets, he knows it all. And he still said, nope, I'm not calling off Jesus' trip to the cross. I'm giving him for you.
Now, when you think about these three dangerous prayers, I think we probably all would admit that test me might be the scariest one, right? Because you don't know. Search me is terrifying in its own way, but like this idea of God leading us, I think this is the area where we struggle the most to fully commit to. Just giving God the reins, right? We do crave control, and I wonder, why don't we let God lead our lives? Like, what is the major thing that gets in the way?
Okay, we were just talking about this at community group on Monday, and I think part of it for us was like, we think that we are. Like, we actually believe that we have given everything to God and that he's leading us. And then over time, we realize it's like, we're like, oh, actually, we've taken it back. We've stolen that thing back. And like, now, like, how did it end up on my lap? I don't know. I didn't see it there, It's like, it ended up back with me. And
wait, you don't have this, God?
Yeah. And I always, I was telling these guys about a story. When I was in high school, I went over to a friend's house and I was like, told to go, I had to go to the bathroom, and they said, okay, go down that hallway and turn and you'll see it there. And I turned the wrong direction, and I looked, and there was just this like huge shrine to Buddha. And it was Buddha, and then there were all these like beautiful flowers and baskets of fruit and all this stuff. And I often think about this shrine because it was like so evident what they had laid before the feet of Buddha. And so I think, as I think about my relationship with God, I try to give pieces and parts of myself to God. Like, oh, I'm laying that one back at the cross. I'm laying that one back at the feet of Jesus. I want this. Nope, not yet. I'm not going to take it for myself. I'm going to give it back. So I often have this like visual of that in my mind. And it's like, sometimes I feel like, oh, I grabbed that basket of fruit right back. Like I had it in front of Jesus, and then I took it. And I think sometimes we just don't even realize when we've given something up so many times, because usually it's not the first time or the second time. It's 5 years, 7 years, 10 years into praying for something that we realize we've snuck that control back, and we don't trust God with it anymore because He didn't do anything for me in the last 10 years. Yeah. He didn't change their heart. He didn't go after my daughter or my grandson the way that I was praying. And so then we realize that we're grabbing control back from God. We have to give
Would you say that stems from like impatience or lack of results? Because Matt mentioned this in pre-preach, just this idea that we do take back, right? We do surrender things to God, but when God doesn't do what we think He should do with them, that's when we're like, okay, I can handle this, right? Or like, I gave you this.
I gave you a chance, God.
It didn't work out. At least you didn't do this. Like I think a great example of this is finances. I think one of the areas that's hard for people to give up is their finances back to God. And people go for it. They're like, oh, and we read the Bibles. We even teach like God, Malachi, you give to God and He'll open His storehouses, and people do it. And like, He didn't open the storehouses for me. So let's bring this back. And I just think there's a lot of areas of our life where we have expectations of what God is going to do with the thing we give Him. And when there's a gap between my expectation and what God does, I don't even notice, but I slowly pull it back.
Mm-hmm. You asked, why is it hard to give up control? Another thing I think also is we don't even know what that looks like. It's like, all right, God lead me, but what does it look like for Him to lead me? How do I even figure out, okay, I'll give up my agenda, but how do I know what God's agenda is? How do I know how to make those choices? And that's kind of on my mind because we're doing the next series. Yeah. Questions, answers, things we'll never know. And the last message in that series is finding God's will. Why is it so hard? Why is it so hard, to find God's will? So I do think there's maybe some people say, okay, I want to give up control, but I don't know where to go from here.
Yeah.
So
am I following God's way or am I following my way?
Right. Yeah. Right. So we'll visit that question later.
It's like a commercial inside the podcast.
Yeah.
Yes. But we do have, hey, I just wanted, so we were talking about this before, but you do a great job with the messages, and I'm sure it feels good when people say, great message, Drew. I just got to say, I don't mind it. If I get a chance to speak and people say, Brad, that was great, but that's not the end game.
Sure.
Right? It's, we don't want just to, have people walk away. And although I do think this message was probably more of a gut punch, than people didn't walk away, just whistling, and a little skip in their step. They might have been really challenged to change, which is what I'm after, I guess, is like what we really want to see is how does the preaching of the Word of God actually change our church? So what would you like to see? What would you hope to see a year from now? What stories would you hope to hear? What would you hope our church look like a year from now as a result of this series on prayer?
Yeah, I mean, I think just that our church would be in what, Thessalonians says, like that we would pray without ceasing. And that call to pray without ceasing wouldn't feel so unreachable, right? That prayer is like, let's stop putting prayer in a box and let's just talk to God, whether that's in our minds, in our thoughts, or just in our car rides or in our quiet times, just this conversation with God throughout our day. And, I guess my biggest prayer, I even said this, is that this would transform our lives, that it would be a rhythm in our life, that it would be something that like, sometimes I'm afraid that like we bring up a topic like prayer and we focus on it 6 weeks. It's like, man, this was so good for my life. And then we shift to the next topic and we forget about the previous one. And I understand that happens. Like this happens in my life, all of our lives. But my prayer is that this prayer would be real and in a journey in our lives regularly, whether we're talking about it or not.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts about, either personally, this series on you, or just what you've seen or hope for in our church?
Yeah, I mean, I totally echo, Drew, what you said. And I think I'd love to see us just being, I think when we do pray prayers like those dangerous prayers, it roots our faith and it gives us the peace of God. And I think when we have unconfessed sin and we're unwilling to let God look, and we're unwilling to let ourselves look at what's inside of us, or when we are unwilling to let God take control of our lives and give those things over, it creates a distance between us and God. And that distance is where anxiety and depression and a lot of the things that just bother us and sit on us and give weight, that's where a lot of our conflict is. And if we can bridge the gap, if we can just shorten that distance between us and God through prayer, we're going to have his peace. We're going to be following him. He will be our counselor in those small moments when we're like, I don't know what I should do. What is God's will for my life? You're going to naturally go to God with those things and say, okay, God, I don't know what this looks like, but I trust that you'll teach me and that I'll keep getting better at it because I know that's what you want from me. So to have that confidence and assurance in Jesus, that would be the thing that I would hope for the people. Just that the peace to know that God is going to pull through for us. And I found a card this morning that my dad wrote me for Christmas. And he said, Merry Christmas, I love you. And then he said, and God loves you too. And he hasn't forgotten a single word that you've ever prayed to him. So maybe that would be the thing that I would hope for us, is that we would believe that God is really hearing our prayers.
Yeah, that's really good.
I love that. Well, listen, this series is changing my life. I know that often I haven't made prayer the priority it should be, or I haven't gotten to the morning, I'll get it to it later in the day, and sometimes it happens later in the day, sometimes it doesn't. But really, ever since the prayer challenge, I've been just trying to, we sleep on the third floor, in the attic up there, I'm not going to leave the third floor, until I pray. I'm going to have that time in prayer, make it a priority. Maybe that means I'm a little late getting to where I'm going, or that I'm missing breakfast or whatever. But I know, I would hope for all of us, Michelle just said it so much better, but that the priority of prayer would just be evident, in the stories that we get to hear a year from now. So thanks to you, to Noah, to Nate, who brought such great help.
Bailey and Nate.
Bailey.
Yeah.
Why did I say? Oh, it wasn't Noah. Okay,
No, it was Bailey.
It was Bailey.
We got it. I got you. I got you covered.
Yeah. Bailey was really good.
He was.
So anyway, but thanks. And let's just talk about what's ahead. Obviously, next week is Easter, but what's happening teaching-wise too?
Yeah, we're starting a brand new series called Questions, Answers, and the Things We Will Never Know. And so we're going to wrestle with really our church's questions to God. And so things from suffering to God's will to science in the Bible contradicting to just all kinds of tough questions that we ask God that we don't always understand. Right. And so in this series, we're going to try to answer those questions as much as we can in the gray area where there are things in life that God will reveal to us, maybe in glory. So I think it's going to be a really good, growing series. We start with suffering this weekend on Easter, great invite time. So it's going to be, I just watched Taylor, who's our producer of the podcast. She's made this piece in the middle of my message. It's going to be amazing. So you're not going to want to miss it.
Yeah, do not miss that. We look forward to seeing you again next week where we kick off that brand new series.